Do you own or thinking about buying a Baofeng or inexpensive Chinese, maybe even Japanese radio for personal preparedness? Do you also sometimes stay awake at night thinking about what-if scenarios, like traditional forms of communication are gone, and you also want to communicate to just a small select group of individuals and not have your message intercepted or understood by the other party? Well, I may have the book for you. This is the Gorilla's Guide to the Baofeng Radio. Straight up, this is not really an amateur radio video, and I know this is the ham radio crash course, but I find this topic so interesting, and as a layperson in this field, that I wanted to learn more. I bought this book months ago. This is from NC Scout. I bet that's his real name. Just call him NC. Anyway, this is a really fascinating book for people who are new to Baofengs. I would argue that the information in here is just about as good as any of the information you would get on one of my videos, and being in book form, for those of you that book learn better, this is probably a good way to go if you're new to the Baofeng. But this book goes into way more detail into what it dips into calling clandestine communications. And what do we mean specifically? Because already some of you are like, oh, buddy, here we go. This video is going to get taken down. No. And inside amateur radio, there are rules we follow, right? We don't use encrypted communication. We don't use coded messages. So even though I sometimes say, hey, did you hear me there, boss? QSL? QSL is a known acronym for did my last communication receive correctly, or did you understand the last thing I said? It's kind of like saying copy or over. Those are things that we know mean something outside of the word that they are, or the three-letter acronym QSL being Q code. So those are accepted things in terms of amateur radio because everybody knows them. It's a universal standard. However, there are maybe situations that likely live up inside your head, but for a small group of people that may actually need to have encrypted or encoded communication, meaning we have a three-letter code that only you and I and a couple other people know about that mean bring beer to the ham shack, right? If we use that over amateur radio, that would be a no-no, but there are situations, you come up with them in your head, I'm not going to tell you what they are, where you may want to do that, and knowing how to is actually really interesting. I'm a big advocate of sharing information and making sure everybody understands pretty much anything they find interesting, so this whole world of encoded messages and how to use radios in an effective way when you may not want people hearing what you're doing or understand what you're doing is fascinating. So I'm going to take you to the tabletop, and I'm going to go through some of my favorite sections. I've had this for months, and I've actually read through it a couple of times, and I've referenced back to it when we did our Hamvention challenge video with the one-time pad. This talks about making a one-time pad, and it's pretty good. It also dips into a little bit of cell phone, mainly Android, communication to a Baofeng for sending digital messages with. They're not encrypted. You can use this as an amateur radio operator, but let's check it out. From the very beginning, this book is based on not just explaining how a Baofeng works, which I guess you could say, given the title, is supposed to be its major point, but in reality, there's not that much spent other than some how-tos on the radio, while intersplicing it with the roles of communication. And yes, this is, again, more of a tactical book here. So what is the roles of communication, sustainment, tactical, clandestine / strategic comms? And then it breaks that down. It's a different way of looking at things. Obviously, this is not the amateur radio way of looking at it, but at the same time, it's fascinating, and I had a good time going through it. A couple of things that are... couple of interesting things here that are mentioned, actually pulled from the news stories. Your cover for action, which is I guess an intelligence term. There are people who cover themselves as being amateur radio operators, so when they walk around with a handheld, they're just like, hey, I'm just a ham, I don't know what you want from me. But in reality, there are some high-profile cases that have been in the news that were actually using amateur radio as a cover for exchanging information and data that they definitely probably did not have the necessary criteria or credentials for. A little bit into the first chapter of the book, this is where it's actually walking through some of the most important parts of the Baofeng, being frequency and memory mode, and specifically frequency mode being one of the most important things that you can do for learning how to function the radio in terms of dialing in the frequency that you want to use. Now, in antithesis to amateur radio, as covered literally on the second page of frequency mode, do not, under any circumstances, program the memory of a radio you intend for using tactical or clandestine communications. I thought that was pretty interesting. That's very not ham radio, right? Do not bother with the memory list at all. And here's a kind of a breakdown on the front panel programming of the radio. Again, it's designed for more of like a squad, small squad tactics type stuff with radio. It's not necessarily something that's going to show you how to use this as an amateur radio operator would. So like using chirp to program memory channels for local repeaters, not in this book, not really a thing. Probably covered in the latter parts, but that's not the main point of this. And again, that's what kind of makes this interesting. It goes to the menu system. If you wanted a text explanation of what all the menu options are for the Baofeng, it has that, which is pretty slick. Now, this is some stuff that was new to me, these terms like Search and Rescue Numerical Encryption Grid, a SARG. New to me completely. I had never heard this before, but it's under Chapter 3, and this whole area is actually really, really interesting. So, signals operating instructions. This is where you're going to have your primary, your alternate, contingency, emergency. Hey, where have we seen that before? The PACE plan. That's right, that we heard from Mike Glover. And this breaks down what that would be. Code words, transmit and receive frequencies, contingency frequencies, emergencies, call signs of the people you'd be talking to. Interesting, there's running passwords like what you would use as a duress word. So if somebody said, Foster's Australian beer is the best, or it just said the word Foster's, and that would be the duress word that, oh no, I'm compromised. Cease communications with this and maybe move from your primary to your alternate or go straight to emergency, right? You'd have a whole thing there. And Search and Rescue Numerical Encryption Grid, there it is, King Father. And you can go read up how to do that. Now I will note that this PACE plan is primarily talking about using the Baofeng, which is not necessarily how I view the PACE plan, and that's fine. Everybody can view it differently if they want to. Primary for me is going to be one device, alternate's a second device, contingency is a third device, and then emergency is your fourth device. If you have two devices functioning as a primary and alternate, well then you only have 3 layers of communication. Which if that's the risk level you want to take, that's fine. And this book actually walks through using the Baofeng as the PACE plan. And it's the frequency sets that you jump through, whether your primary, alternate, contingency, or on the next page, your emergency frequencies. Now regarding call signs, it does mention it both in the form of our government call signs like for GMRS and amateur radio, but it also goes through military call signs and some of the explanations there, and some unconventional warfare operators when it comes to call signs and hierarchy and all that interesting stuff as well. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, check the links in the video description. It is an affiliate code to Amazon where this is available. I bought this book. The creator doesn't know that I have this. I don't think anybody knows that I have this, except for you now. So yeah, if you want to help out the channel, go check out the link in the video description. Now, the SARG explanation that further carries on, by the way, it's explained earlier in the book, and now it's taking a larger amount of time to explain it. I have to say that this is actually a really interesting process, so if you go get this book or you end up learning about SARG, which I assume you can just Google the information for, it's pretty fascinating in how you would have a running password, a duress word, and then these rotate throughout the day. Again, not something you would do in your day-to-day, but having a plan for it, at least understanding what it is pretty fascinating, I think, from everything I've seen in the book. I think one of my favorite parts about this book is where practical application of tactical radios is mentioned, and particularly this area with communication windows covers it in a really cool story, talking about some action in Afghanistan. And basically the explanation here is the most dangerous times for communication and for the team that went into these different areas was their entrance into a position and then the extraction from the position. And they had their radios on for the entrance and the extraction, and then after that point they were off. And the hide area was separated from the transmission area. And then the transmission area had different comm windows that would be open, like say at nighttime or daytime. And if any two of those windows or both of those windows are missed, that was a message that, uh-oh, we're compromised and we need to send in people, or we need to figure out another way to get those individuals to extract for whatever mission they were doing. And this comma window concept is pretty interesting because it gives you a concept, one, of exchanging information between you, headquarters, you and another camp or whatever. But then it also gives you a legit, no-joke way of determining if everybody's still safe, which in a first responder situation, these people are going to be more actively communicating because they may be relaying traffic for different individuals that are harmed, say during a wildfire, or the number of people that have evacuated, a number of things, medical records, medical information, what have you. Those comma windows are kind of like always open. It's a 24/7 comma window. But in a more discrete thing, like in a mission, then you might not be doing that. You might just have a comma window where you leave to another area, or you have somebody in some forward-looking area or some safe area that they have a good view of the ground below you, and they would be the ones that were doing the transmitting. Obviously, being higher up helps as well. And to further carry this on, the next page talks about traffic handling and reports. And again, from an amateur radio standpoint, traffic handling is just routine. It's something that's happening all the time. And so this would be something that's referred to as sustainment level communications. But in a tactical mission or a clandestine situation, you wouldn't be transmitting. In fact, whenever you are transmitting, everything we are saying is being monitored, and everything we're saying is being copied down. Not to mention how you sound on the radio, and a number of other things that you're giving up when you transmit, as well as not just your location, because you can be direction found through triangulation, right? So it's really fascinating because it walks through call sign exchanges, or from one radio operator to another, and how the traffic might be handled in a more difficult situation or more clandestine environment. I'm done with this statement, over to you. I'm done transmitting. I understand. I copied it down. Now, this is like a traditional, I want to no joke make sure I'm understanding the message being sent, because it's going to be copied. And again, here comes that SARG combination, and that's what's to authenticate the message being sent. You might not be sending this in the clear in a contested environment, and as amateur radio operators, again, I'm reiterating, we're probably not going to be asked to or involve ourselves in this type of stuff, but fascinating. Now, I'd say the front half of the book is where you're going to get a lot of that information of the practical usage of communications in kind of a contested environment, with some examples of historical situations, battles, fights in Afghanistan and whatnot. Towards the middle of the book and on, you're going to get more references to things like our phonetic alphabet, how we say different words, which that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Interesting. I never really... Niner? Give me a niner. But if you keep going on, you're going to see things like medical evacuation reports and information. I'm not going to jump through this too much because, again, I think you should probably take a look at it. Towards the middle to the back, that's when we get into things like antennas, and we get some breakdowns on some really interesting antennas and information on practical items for Baofengs, right? So this is a BNC adapter. You know, I've talked about those in the past and how important they are, as well as some basic theory with how radio propagation works, the higher the frequency, how that works, obstacles, and the receipt of copy. And then some practical antennas that you can do. This is just a dipole. And hey, insulators. Ration spoon. I never really thought about using an MRE spoon for an insulator, but yeah, sure, that would work. And of course, our favorite, the split post BNC adapter, also known as the Cobra head. I don't know who came up with that, but hey, it's good to go. A little bit of information on gain using something like a Yagi antenna. In the beginning of the book, you kind of get the meat and potatoes of how the radio works, how you would use the radio if you were in some kind of a contested environment, not to transmit often, but if you had to, here's how you precisely exchange information. The latter half is more of the philosophical, explaining why things should be done the way they are done, and using practical examples. So in this case, Nigeria in the Boko Haram, China during the Hong Kong freedom protests of 2018 and COVID-19, Operation Cuba Libre. You should go read these stories. They're pretty cool. Sustainment communications for the guerrilla. Again, go look at this. I'm not going to spoil any of this for you because it's all really good stuff. And then tactical communications. And there's a definition of words here, and they have explanations that go beyond what you normally think. Tactical versus sustainment. What does that mean? And using kind of historical examples to give you the reason. Clandestine. Obviously, this is like spy stuff, right? When you see that. Very important. Digital encoding and encryption. What is the difference? Encoding versus encryption. And what does it mean? Good job explaining that. I think that was nicely done. Now, what I really like to see is using the Baofeng in unique and interesting ways, and this is definitely it. Baofeng digital operation. So using an application called FL Message. By the way, if you have an application called Rattlegram, this is a very similar concept between the two. And it basically allows you to exchange text like this over audio pulses, and you can receive and send information by just holding your phone up to the speaker and PTTing or receiving off the speaker itself, and that works just fine. You can even send an image. Well, that's Doc Holliday right there. Now, if you really want to get snazzy, there's even a thing for one-time pad. Obviously, this is not for amateur radio. I think I've already said that. This review is a little bit outside my norm. But this is actually a really cool reference, and it explains what a one-time pad is and that it is mathematically impossible to break so long as the two people, the transmitter has their transmit cipher and the receiver has the receive cipher. That's unbreakable so long as you can't bring them together, which you generally don't do that. You deploy a person with the one-time pad. There's what it looks like. That's the identifier. I did a video that didn't get posted publicly because I'm likely going to keep it private. It was used during the Hamvention Challenge, where we actually used a one-time pad to decipher something that was not done over the air. Remember, we don't transmit encrypted, but you can see that if you had followed along. Appendixes. Now we get into some of the fun little stuff with Baofeng repeaters, explaining how to do it with solar panels and the appropriate equipment, and what you might need to go buy or what you might run into. And they go into relatively good detail, as well as building your own little J-pole type antenna. And then towards the latter half is some more appendices and information there for a sample, by the way, sample trigrams. Let's go back here. Sample trigram list is 3 letters that break into something coded. So if you had a JML, that's ASAP. If you had a HHX, that was counter-attacking, right? And you get the idea. Common use phrases that you can cut down to just 3 characters, which are easy to transmit phonetically. And yeah, just a shout out to NC Scout, former member of one of the U.S. Army Special Reconnaissance Units. He is the owner of Brush Beater Training and Consulting. This is a fun little book. It's inexpensive. It's available on Amazon, and I love to see it, right? This is somebody who took the time to take their knowledge and impart it in, I think, a really digestible way using a radio that everybody has. It's not ham radio, right? We're not going to do that on ham radio. You're not going to do this on GMRS either, but it's fascinating, if for nothing else other than the reading of the history and the practical, like why the militaries, guerrilla warfare, whomever, in these certain situations might use this kind of stuff. And so I really enjoyed it. So NC Scout, hey man, thanks for making the book. I did buy this. I didn't get it from him or anything like that. I bought this on Amazon months and months ago. I just had to have it because I saw somebody mention it on one of the after chats or on the HRCC Discord. And I was like, yeah, this is worth throwing in the old library. I don't know. Think we'll ever need comms like this just among us in the North America? I don't know. What do you think? My overarching review of this book is quite simple. If you are a Baofeng neophyte and you dip a little bit into the tactical community, then this is probably a no-brainer. The other details, though, that talk about emergency preparedness, having a communications plan, the PACE plan, field antennas, even dipping into the clandestine a little bit. So this is a point that I'd like to make. Obviously, I make a lot of videos. I talk about emergency preparedness. I have built emergency plans for communication in off-grid situations. And while I have practiced some of those communication skills in the field, it's under a no-stress situation. I've never been in a war. I've never been in the military. So my practical knowledge is only at the preparedness phase. I haven't gone into the realm of actually doing or needing to do. So having an author that actually has done this stuff and is showing you how to do it with civilian equipment is actually really valuable. Now, hear me out, ham radio operators who are strict rule followers. I'm not saying you should go out and use this stuff. I'm saying it might be kind of cool to know how to use this stuff. And as amateur radio operators, I think we all generally go down the road of wanting to know more, and knowledge is craved and something you chase. So I give this a high regard in terms of a book review and something that you might find interesting. For a lot of you, you're like, oh no, this is already way down my rabbit hole. I already bought that thing. Or you probably already own it. So if this is new to you, check it out. And if you already have it, I hope you're enjoying it, because I certainly do. Anyway, I'm Josh, KI6NAZ. Thanks so much for watching. 73. Derp derp.